Hey everybody, this is Filter Starcraft and welcome to episode number 1 of my Zerg Bronze to Master series. If you've been following me so far, you know that natively I'm a Masters Terran player. That's what I'm good at. That's the race I've played for 2 years. So coming in and learning Zerg was pretty cool. I've spent some time playing them here and there, but I've never really studied the top players and looked at the concepts they follow through with. So I think there's some misconceptions that certain players kind of break about the race, some stuff that's been common and been said since 6 months into the game's launch that I don't really think are true anymore, and I'll mention a little bit of that in this particular episode. However, our main focus here is we're going to look at Stefano's Zerg vs Protoss mass roach style, but we're going to break it down a little bit further, and instead of getting a third base, we're going to try to stick to 2 bases. The reason for that is in the Bronze League, I think it's much more important to learn the 2-base style before you get into 3-base, because the 3-base really only applies when you're facing a Protoss player. When you're playing against a Terran and when you're playing against another Zerg player, taking a really fast, risky 3rd base is exactly what it sounds like. It can be a nightmare to hold that base. So we're going to try to keep it consistent for the Bronze League with just the 2-base roach play, but it should be extremely strong. You should win all your games in Bronze. I know when I was doing it, I had absolutely no problem. It's really important to remember that this is not a build order. This is purely designed to give you a really solid foundation and a strong base to work off so that you can start doing things like speeding expands properly. I'm not going to be working with Zerglings, I'm not working with Banelings, I'm not working with Infestors yet. It's just going to be basically pure Roach. And there's a few reasons for that, but the most important one is it's going to let us get some really clean looks at our injects and some really clean looks at how many drones we're making. In this particular video, I'm not going to recover how to set up your game and set up all your game settings. If you want to jump into that, just jump into my first Terran video. I go over that in the first half of the video. Watch that first to get a really basic introduction if you're brand new to my series. Otherwise, we're going to jump right into it here. Now, the game in the background is me just doing the bronze level build. That's it. I do nothing else, nothing different. I don't even micro in that game, with the one exception being that once I get to his base and I've killed off his natural, I end up having to micro just because if you A move and there's a wall up, everything just dances around the front and doesn't do anything. So I had to actually micro there. But outside of that, did absolutely nothing different than the bronze build against a diamond Terran. Now roaches are supposed to be bad, right? Especially against Terran. Well, I killed Marine Tank with it, so it definitely works if you do it and you hit your timings correct and you play strong. Alright, now that we got our basic game setting options out of the way, let's take a look at some common Zerg misconceptions. One of the biggest things that I think is out there right now is the fact that Zerg is a very reactive race, not a race that forces the other player to react. So what I mean by that is people say, well, if he's making X unit, then I have to make Y unit. And I really don't think that's the case. If you study top-end players like Stefano, he's going to go Roach and ZVP. That's just how it works. The Protoss player knows it, Stefano knows it, and he still absolutely destroys them. A lesser player is going to go, well, you know, he's making a lot of Stalkers, a lot of Immortals, I need to switch over and just go pure Ling, and then he's not going to be used to it, his build's not going to be timed out just right, and he's going to get absolutely destroyed. So I do think there is something to be said for some reactions to certain plays, especially cheeses and all-ins. The Zerg has to be very good at reacting to that, but that comes with experience and building a proper mechanical foundation. So that's going to be our focus. We don't really want to worry too much about the reactive side of things. That can come later. The main thing right now is just getting a very strong, basic mechanical style to our play, so that we're able to watch something in the GSL and rip off what Nesty did, no problem, just by watching it. All we're going to do when we watch an ST game is we're just going to look at his gas timing and kind of figure out the rest of the build from there. So I'm going to try to boil Zerg down as basic as I possibly can. Now, one of the other big misconceptions I think there is about Zerg right now is that you need to use Infestors and you need to use Banelings. I got all the way up to basically just below Masters MMR over a week or so of playing without using any Banelings, without using Infestors, except for a couple of games. Now, I didn't need to use them in those games, so I was trying to use those units, but being a Terran player, my control with them is just not that good. So for me, the best way for me to play and win is just to make a lot more stuff than the other guys. Now, what that means is, for the purposes of this tutorial and this guide, I'm going to steer around Infestors and I'm going to steer around Banelings until we get up to the higher level of play. The reason for that is Infestors and Banelings are very thin, and you have to make just the right amount of them. If you try to engage a Terran army and you don't have enough Banelings and they all get shot up by tanks, your army gets wiped up and you lose the game. The same thing applies with infestors. If you whiff a couple fungal growths and his marines are spread out or split up and your fungals just don't do the damage they need to, you proceed to lose the game right there and then. There's really no secondary play you can make. So I want to try to avoid that as much as possible, which is why I'm not going to bring infestors in and I'm not going to bring banelings in until a little bit later on. That being said, we're going to establish a really good foundation on how we can use our gas so that when we do want to get those units, it's as simple as building an infestation pit, getting some infestors out. Our life will not change at all. So we're going to stick with kind of the roach play, a little bit of roach hydra play too, and we should have a lot of success with that. Alright, I want to talk about some very basic Zerg concepts. I spent a lot of time studying players like Stefano to really figure out how they play and kind of what makes them so good. And one of the big things about watching Stefano play is you're absolutely blown away by how many drones the guy can make within the first 6 to 8 minutes of the game. There's one very specific reason for this, and I think a lot of players kind of miss the boat, especially when I was watching my own ZVZs, I was watching other players play, watching replays people post, that kind of stuff. One of the big things I see is players are not instantly spending their larva. What I mean by that is, I'm going to use a very clear example here. If you supply block and you miss an overlord right as you get 4 larvae popping off, what happens? Well, that overlord takes 20 seconds to make. Now normally each drone mines about 40 minerals a minute. That's about 10 minerals over a 20-second period of time. It actually ends up being a little bit more. So what does that mean? It's really simple. When those 4 drones pop off, you're gonna miss 20 seconds. What's that 20 seconds worth to you? Well, that's worth another drone. What does a drone do? Mines 40 minerals a minute. That means you're losing out on a second drone about a minute and 10 seconds later. And then guess what? You're gonna miss out on 2 more drones a little bit after that, and 4 more drones actually. So as you can see, it's really important not to mess up your larva with a supply block. The other thing I want to bring up is not instantly spending your larva. Now, a lot of players make this mistake. They'll be talking in chat, they'll be changing their music, whatever. The most important part of the game for a Zerg player is that first 6 to 8 minutes. With a Terran, you know, when I'm chilling out, I can kind of change my music, queue up a couple SCVs, because I know I don't have anything else to do. With a Zerg player, if I'm doing something else or not paying attention or not spamming SD to make that drone, I can lose 10 seconds of drone mining time. That ends up being a pretty big deal as it scales throughout the game, because if you keep missing them, it's exactly the same as a Protoss or a Terran player when they miss a worker. So you really want to make sure you're spending that larva as soon as it pops off. You don't want to go ahead and plant down a macro hatchery right as those 4 larvae pop, because then you can't spend them, you can't use them. It's really, really important. If you're not spending your larva perfectly, what's going to happen is you're going to miss the 6-minute benchmark by a couple of drones, and you're going to miss the 8-minute benchmark by like 10 drones. Ends up being a pretty big deal. So make sure you're hitting all your larva injects. Make sure you're hitting, spending all your larva when it pops off. The next thing I'm going to talk about is injects. Now, there's a ton of guides out there on Team Liquid and all over the place that tell you the most effective way to do an inject. It doesn't matter how you're doing your injects, you just want to make sure you hit them every single time and your queens aren't wandering all over. If your queens wander all over and you end up missing a bunch of injects because of that, you're going to lose that game on the spot. So for me personally, watching a lot of the top Korean players play, watching Stefano play, what he does is he just goes to the map, so he clicks on the mini-map, finds his queen, clicks it, injects. Does that for each one of his hatcheries. Now Stefano's a really fast player, so that works for him. For me personally, what I like to do is bind all my queens to hotkey number 5, and then I just use the inject from that. So I press my hotkey, click on the mini-map, then inject from there. It's really, really important you never miss an inject though. Every second you're missing an inject is a big deal. If you miss 2 injects in a game, for whatever reason, if you're going out to micro a bunch of units, maybe you save a couple of Zerglings or you save a couple of Roaches, but you miss 3 injects in the background, well, you just cost yourself the chance to make 12 Roaches off those 3 injects. That's a pretty big deal. If you've ever played a Zerg versus Zerg, and it kind of gets to the mid-game, the other player has 40 Roaches and you have 28, who wins that fight? It's pretty simple and straightforward, right? Now, a lot of people know, well, yeah, I know my injects, I have to hit all my injects. It's really important to hold yourself to the standard, though. It's really simple. Just take a look at your 10-minute window, see if you missed any injects. If you did miss injects, go back, check, see when they happen, and correct it. One of the big things, too, is when you're in a battle, As soon as you kind of feel comfortable in that fight, doesn't matter what you're fighting, all your units have A moved and they're attacking, go back, check all your injects. Then you're going to know when you're going to need to go back and inject again. Don't miss injects in a battle, don't miss injects for any reason. Injects are probably the #1 thing to Zerg. If you can consistently hit every single one of your injects, it does not matter what units you're making, all the way through Platinum. Alright, the last concept I want to talk about for Zerg that applies for any level of play is every single Zerg build just boils down to the gas timings. It's as simple as that. If you know when a player takes his gases, you can copy his build, no problem at all. Now this is going to apply to your own play too, because if you miss your gas timings or you're a minute late on your gas timings, you're not going to be able to produce the units that you need to produce. So it's really important that when you're supposed to take gas at 6 minutes, that's when you take gas. You have to make sure you're on point every single game. It doesn't matter if you get harassed or whatever, you can't miss those gas timings. It becomes extremely important. Now there does kind of get a point with Zerg where you're just kind of taking all the gas geysers and that's affecting your unit mixture. You want to make sure you balance that. If you have 1,000 gas in the bank and like 2,000 or 3,000 minerals and you're looking to reinforce, you have to analyze that. If you're trying to go like a roach infestor style of play, try to make all your roaches first and then bring in your infestors, because your infestors are going to be the units that get capped out by the gas. So it's really important that you don't end up with a situation where you made like 8 infestors, you have no gas left for roaches, so you have to reinforce with lings. I know what's happened to me, and my lings aren't upgraded. I end up in a lot of trouble. So gas timings are really important. We're going to talk more about that as the tutorials go on. I am going to mention a very basic gas timing in this video, although it is not the focus of this particular, I don't want to call it a build order again, but for this particular build and this particular play. So again, the gas timing, not super important for this one, is definitely going to be very important for the silver video though. Now when I was preparing for this tutorial, I said I have to make roaches work. Roach should be able to work against any race. I really don't see any reason for it not to. So I think I lost 1 game in gold, but other than that in bronze and silver, even in platinum I won most of my games, basically just making roaches in every matchup. So it's a very strong unit. It's really simple. It's going to work really well, especially in Bronze League, and it's going to work well in Silver League too. So that's going to be our unit of choice. Alright, I want to talk about the 2 drone timings that we're going to be looking for. I'll talk more about them in the benchmarks, but we're going to look at our drones at 6 minutes, and we're going to look at our drones at 8 minutes. At 6 minutes, we want to have about 30 drones with 4 to 5 more on the way. And then at 8 minutes, we're going to be looking at 55 drones. That can be 50 drones with 5 more on the way, however you want to twist it around. But you want to have all your 50 drones, your 55 drones, done at your 8-minute window. Alright, so we're going to jump into a practice game here. Really simple. Get a decent split going, make sure we get a drone going, set our rally up, make sure it's all safe, and send our scouting overlord out. On a 2-player map, you can just send that right to your opponent's base now. With the speed upgrade, it's really hard to pick them off in mid-map, so definitely good for Zerg. If you're playing against a Terran or a Protoss player, your second overlord, which you're going to make at 9, goes to your natural. If you're playing against a Zerg, you can actually send it to kind of create an overlord train, because you don't need it at your natural. Another Zerg player can't cannon rush you or bunker rush you. So we'll just send our second overlord there, because I don't know what my opponent is. Keep on droning. It's really important to make sure I'm not whiffing any drones here. The early game for Zerg is super important. Everything before 6 to 8 minutes, actually, the more you concentrate on that, the better off you're going to be. So overlord pops, got my 2 drones on the way. I'm going to go up to 14 and then make a pool. If you're whiffing and you lose 5 seconds of drone or something, it ends up adding up really fast. You'll have a hard time making enough drones. I think that's one of the biggest things a lot of newer Zerg players make, or even some experienced ones. They're just not making their drones in time. So it looks like we got another Zerg player to play against, which is nice. I like to tuck my spawning pool into my hatch as much as possible. Kind of makes it more difficult to surround. Limits mobility a little bit, gives me a nice niche for my queen, so definitely like that. At 15, I'm going to take my expansion. Again, I'm not drone scouting. I haven't done any drone scouting yet, so I still have to learn some timings for when a good way to do that is, but it's not very important just yet for me. Alright, so can't get Cannon Rush because I have my Overlord here, and I can't get Bunker Rush because my Overlord's there, so really simple. Throw down my hatchery. There we go. Get up to 15 drones again. We're going to want to make an Overlord here. So let's get that guy in the way. And then Pair of Lings as soon as that finishes. And then now I need to go back into drones here. I'm going to end up being able to start my queen basically as soon as that Overlord pops. This is what I'm looking to do. So I'm just mashing SD because I want to make sure I don't miss drones. And I'm going to get that queen underway. So now things are looking good. Got my 2 Lings out. That'll help me deal with any kind of cannon that might be on my natural or whatever. You just kind of have to deal with that, unfortunately. And just wait. Don't necessarily run over and take your 3rd base right away. Just wait, kill it off, get ready. You're in good shape. Alright, so I'm going to need another Overlord here. Let's go ahead and get ready for that. Natural should be finishing up soon too, which is nice. So start that Overlord. And I'm just going to transfer. You can transfer about 5 drones because you don't necessarily want a lot down there. But you do want to have a couple drones. So what I'm going to do is get a queen started there right away. Make sure that guy drops off his minerals. And just make 2 spine crawlers. I like to have 2 spines because it just keeps me safe against whatever the opponent tries to do in terms of an early rush. It really helps out a lot. So let's get those drones going. Make sure I'm getting them all. 6 minutes, I'm going to be looking to take all my gas. So let's do that. But not yet. And just get my inject. I'm going to need Overlord and some drones. And things are looking good. So, get my injects, getting my drones made basically as soon as I possibly can. Get that other queen, hit my injects. You can rearrange those spine crawlers if you want. You don't feel they're best suited there. I do like them there, and things are looking good. So, got a nice amount of Overlords. And hit my inject. Perfect. Get another Overlord because we need it when this hatch pops off. So there we go. Just make sure I hit that. Get all my drones. Get another over. And I'm gonna take my gas. I'm actually gonna take all 4 gas at once. Which seems like overkill, but it works out. So in 7 minutes I'm gonna throw down my Roach Warren and 2 evolution chambers. There we go. Hit my injects. And my main gas should be ready, but I want to get this inject, so I'm going to make sure I hit it. As soon as I get the energy for it anyway. Let's get some guys in gas. Come on. There we go. And let's get some more guys in gas here. Nice and simple. More drones, a couple more overs. And let's go ahead and get our explosive Roach Warren and a couple evolution chambers. Now, my main's looking saturated, so I want to get everything down to my natural. Let's hit that inject. There we go. Oh, 2 Overlords, that's nice. Some more drones. At 8 minutes, I'm just going to stop droning. And start making roaches. So, get my lair now. You can see my gas building up a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to take full advantage of all that gas, so. Another Overlord. Some more drones. Okay, and it is 1 more round of drones in, and now it's 8 minutes. I want to start making roaches, essentially. So, we're going to start carapace, and we're going to start attack, and we're going to start making roaches. When you're playing a Zerg versus Zerg, things change a little bit. The reason for that is you just make units when he makes units. You can defend just fine with slow links as long as you stay on creep. So, just making roaches, making sure my injects are up to date. That's all I'm focused on. Roaches and injects. Since that lair finishes, I want to start roach speed. As soon as roach speed finishes, we're going to attack. Really simple. Gives us a nice timing. Oh, looks like we need some overlords, so let's get those going. Once you kind of get to this point in the game, it's okay. You're not making drones anymore, so you're not losing mining time by having the supply block. The supply block's still bad, though. Alright. And that's definitely something I should be improving on. I should have more of an overhead. Let's get more roaches. A couple more overloads on the way too. When you're doing roaches, you're gonna need to make like 2-3 overloads at a time sometimes, because they do stack up really fast. And they take a lot of food. And just kind of waiting on roach speed. When that gets about halfway done, I'm gonna attack here. So I'm hoping to aim for around 11 minutes for my attack. Oh, looks like I'm hitting my injects too well. Alright, gonna need some more overlords here as soon as possible. So it's actually impossible to perfectly inject every single time. Queens just don't have enough energy to do that, so it's kind of a cool thing. If you hit your injects perfectly, you'll actually have a little bit of a bump there, which is not too big of a deal. And this is all I'm focused on right now. So, alright. So I'm going to start +2/+2. And we're going to attack now. And just a move attack. Just rally everything in. We're going to have speed soon, so we're going to be able to reinforce really quickly. And need a couple more orbies. But things are looking pretty good. And this is just off 2 base. So I know Stefano can do an 11-minute max off 3. That's still pretty good army at off 2 base, especially for Bronze League. So, alright. Now this tutorial is a little bit more advanced than my Terran one, because there are upgrades and stuff like that in there. But if you're having trouble with just the basics, you can definitely skip the upgrade side of things. And I just want to focus on my injects. I don't even care what my army's doing. I know it's going to win. Really simple. So, again, almost a 12-minute roach max off 2 base. That's pretty solid. Especially with 2-2 on the way. Not bad at all. That's just 2 hatch. You know, it's just hitting your injects. Making sure you're not supply blocking. It's a pretty tough army for anybody to deal with. Okay, Sizzle's Overlord spawn, I'll max out. Computer's GG. And got one more Overlord on the way here, and then we'll max out. And that's the game. There we go, 200, 200. Off 2 base, took about 13 minutes. That's not bad at all. Right, and I just want to check, make sure my injects are perfect. Then I'll be happy. I want to check my drone count, my injects after. Don't care too much about my upgrades, my roaches and stuff like that. That's for a later date. No need to worry about it just yet. Alright. Nice and easy. Alright, let's talk about the most important thing, which are benchmarks. Now the big thing with Zerg is, don't make excuses for yourself. Don't say, well, I was reacting to this or I was doing that. Because if you start doing that, you're going to find you're never going to hit the benchmarks and it's completely useless. So what you have to do is hold yourself to this standard with no exceptions. The only thing you can kind of do is go, well, that game wasn't a very good game to benchmark because X happened or Y happened. Situations like if a Terran player does a really early proxy 2-Rex, or a Protoss player does a proxy 2-Gate, or another Zerg player does just a 1-base kind of Baneling bust or 1-base Zergling play where you have to make units, you don't have a choice, then your benchmarks aren't gonna line up. What you want to look for in that situation is, hey, did I outdrone my opponent? Awesome, that's good. So just look to make sure you outdroned your opponent, and then you beat him as the game kind of swung to the mid game. That's where those games are important. However, for every other game, and it's really easy to push pretty much any game to this mid game stage, especially when like Protoss does a fast expand or whatever, these benchmarks are going to apply and they're going to be really, really easy to take a look at. Again, don't make excuses for yourself. If you start making excuses as Zerg and say, well, I needed to make these links to stay safe against X, you're going to miss the whole point of this particular episode. Don't do that. Just follow the benchmarks, measure yourself against them, no excuses. That's how I've been holding myself, and my play from a macro standpoint on Zerg has developed a lot in the past 2-3 weeks while I've been practicing. So the first benchmark we're going to take a look at is the 6-minute window. At 6 minutes, you want to check for how many drones you have. You want to make sure you have at least 30 drones with another 5 in production, or you can have about 35 total. So that's the idea here. You want to count the number of drones you have and the number of drones you have in production. You want that number to be at least 35. I've had a couple of games where it ends up being 36 or 37, but you want to make sure you're hitting at least 35 in the first 6 minutes of the game. It's really easy to do. You can still do it while making a couple of spine crawlers. It's not a big deal. Now the second window you want to take a look at is your 8-minute drone window. The reason you want to do it in 2 separate gaps is it's easier to identify where the problem is. If you're missing the 6-minute window, then you're obviously missing an inject or an overlord, or something's just going wrong early in the game, and you want to take a look at that. If you're missing the 8-minute window, it's usually a sign of you're playing a little bit scared, you're not crisp on how fast you're making drones, your injects are just a little bit off. So that's why we have 2 windows here. Now for the 8-minute window, we want to have 55 drones. I know that's a lot, but you can get 55. That means to get your 55 drones, you count the number of drones you currently have, as well as the number that are in production at 8 minutes. If you start making like 7 at 8:06 or something, it's too late, don't count it. Only count what you currently have and what's in production. If you're at 55 drones at 8 minutes, you're going to have a wicked 2-base economy, as well as you start going to like getting a 3rd base faster and things like that, you're going to be able to get the right amount of drones for the 3 bases really fast and really easily. So again, we're looking for 55 drones or drones in production at 8 minutes. Now the last thing we want to look at for a benchmark is our 10-minute queen energy. The reason we want to look at 10 minutes is it's a nice easy number to remember. You're going to have a few opportunities to do injects. There might have been a little pressure or an attack against you by this point, and it's really crucial that your queen injects are right on the money. So for my purpose, what I'm looking for is that my queens have less than 10 energy combined. So what you do is at 10 minutes you go look at both your bases, you take a look at your queen, wait for it to do its next inject, and then count it. So if your queen hasn't done an inject and one's about halfway done, just wait for that one to pop, wait for your next inject, and then count your queen energy. Doesn't matter if that inject is at 10, 12 or whatever, and then go do the same thing for the next queen. So make sure that you're counting your queen energy immediately after they made an inject. Makes it really clean and easy to count. You're looking to have less than 10 total energy between both your queens, and if you end up dropping like 3 or 4 creep tumors, it's not good enough. I haven't even been doing creep spread when I've been doing this particular build. Works just fine without doing that creep spread, so we'll worry about that at a later date. But for right now, we're looking at having less than 10 energy combined on both our queens at 10 minutes. If you have any more than that, we're missing our injects, something's going wrong, and we're really going to mess ourselves up. I want to give you a really good, clear, clean example of why this is important. If you have, say, 15 roaches and you're microing your 15 roaches, and you're spending your whole time microing them, you end up missing 2 injects in that window, as well as you lose, say, 7 of those 15 roaches. So that leaves you with 8 roaches left over, but you missed 4 injects, because you missed 2 rounds of injects while you're doing that micro. Those 4 injects, that's 4 larvae each, that's 16 more roaches that you just lost because you were trying to micro. So make sure your queen injects are perfect. When your roaches are fighting and they're engaged, you can go back and quickly check and make sure you hit your injects. It's not a big deal. Roaches are going to do just fine on their own. They're a really good, big, beefy unit that you don't need to worry too much about, and you can just worry about hitting your injects. So that 10-minute inject window is huge. Hold yourself to that standard. If you're missing injects or something's going a little bit wrong along the way, don't make excuses for it. Just make sure you get those injects. Alright, that wraps up my first episode of my Zerg Bronze to Master series. The main focus of this episode is drone timing and injects. That's all. Everything else doesn't matter. Don't worry about when you're getting your gas and your Roach Warren and stuff like that. If you do mess up timings for that, it's not a big deal. I know within my own play, what I like to do is take all 4 gas at 6 minutes, then I make my Roach Warren and 2 evolution chambers at 7. But don't hold yourself to that when you're looking at your benchmarks. That's going to be for the next video. For this particular one, it's all about your drone count and your injects. Once that's solid and you're hitting that consistently every game, it's going to be really easy to add in a really strong solid roach play, and then add in, infestors and zerglings and all sorts of crazy cool stuff. But it's really important that we're just hitting the basic benchmarks for right now. So with that being said, if you enjoy the video, definitely subscribe to me. There's going to be a lot more Zerg stuff coming up. And hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions. There's also a thread over on Team Liquid that you can talk to me there too. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Really hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, hey, leave them in the comments below. Love to hear from you.